Hi, my name is Kevin Larrabee. I'm the head coach and owner here at Allied Strength in Gloucester, Massachusetts. Thank you for spending the time to either watch or listen to this wherever you are. It's going to be about 30 minutes, but I promise it's going to be very valuable. You're going to get plenty out of this, whether it's some new push-up correctives, regressions, progressions, or maybe just a different way to think about how you program. But I wanted to deliver a lot of value with this, so I promise you're going to get that. But we should probably start from why I'm doing this. Basically, over my about 8 years at MBSC, a lot of times in the staff meetings, we would go over programming. And I would always be on the side of we should be making sure that athletes or adults should be able to do 8 really good push-ups before we start loading them up with a barbell bench press or a dumbbell bench press. Like that should be a prerequisite before we progress them into those other movements that are loaded up. Mike always kind of was on the side of, no, let's barbell bench press. These kids, they want to bench, let's bench. We have the racks, it's a good movement. We can do it well. Let's go for it. And we always had these debates back and forth. We'll get into that in a little bit too. But it's come up twice, I think, in the last couple months. So I thought instead of just like putting together a snarky remark on social media, maybe provide a little bit of value, because I think that's where our industry fails sometimes. Is we'll disagree with something and then we'll just say something and then there's really never a good discussion. So again, why I'm doing that for debate and discussion, best format. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of text. This is a PowerPoint, but I have that text in there and there will be videos, but text is in there for people that want to follow along with the notes, so I can post the notes online as well. And talking about Mike, Mike's greatest strength is his willingness to listen to, different opinions, to be open to, hey, maybe the way that we're doing it right now is not the best way to do it. All right, let's listen, let's talk about it, let's discuss, let's maybe even try, and we'll figure out the best way to do anything. I spent 8 years at MBSC. I'm still a business partner with Mike. I'm a co-founder of the CFSC, Body by Boyle and I, and MBSC Thrive. And I would say like 95% of what is done at MBSC, like I 100% agree with. It is a huge influence on what I do here at Allied Strength. But it has been really fascinating to me why this is kind of one thing where Mike and I don't see eye to eye with. So hopefully maybe, Mike, I can change your mind a little bit, or at least to think about it in a different way. And again, we're doing this for education. I want to provide a little bit of value with this. This isn't going to be like a drive-by Facebook post or something like that. And there's probably going to be a follow-up. What would be great is, Mike checks this out, thinks about it, then we talk about it on a podcast or something like that. That way we can have, both sides and it's not just one side and one side. We'll see where that goes. So backstory part 1. Again, this has been brought up in staff meetings a lot over the course of my 8 years when I was there. It was debated quite a bit. Again, I would raise my hand when we talked about programming, and Mike would always give me an opportunity to state my case. We talk about it, and then at the end of the day, his name's on the building. So he's making that final call, but at least he would allow me to make that case. And when I was writing the middle school program, we were able to prioritize that push-up in our kind of day one. Like day one was always like, what do we need to make sure every athlete's going to be able to do? I was making sure I was putting in push-ups. So again, that's kind of what this is. Do we bench press on day one or do we do push-ups? Also we're talking about new athletes, new adults. What should we be doing for these folks that they've never done a training program before? They're coming in, they probably lack a lot of shoulder stability, core stability, and strength, all that stuff that we want from an athlete. Should we be starting them with a barbell bench press, or should we be, having some prerequisites, some standards before we start loading up these movements? Dumbbell bench press versus barbell bench press for middle school athletes. That's another thing to consider. And so this goes back to the January discussion. These are kind of like both together. But I think it was in the January staff meeting where, Mike said, hey, I came in yesterday and I saw 2 middle school kids doing dumbbell bench press and all the other kids were doing barbell bench press. And the kids' explanation was that they were overhead athletes. They were 11-year-old boys. So what ended up happening, I think Marco was coaching the group, and he was brilliant, because they ran out of racks and they needed, all these kids to do their upper body like horizontal pressing movement. So he said, well, these kids are baseball players. We're out of room, so we can set up 2 benches and have them do dumbbell bench press instead. And that way, we can continue to work with the flow of the group. So Mike brought up a couple points. One, these kids are 11 years old. Should they be overhead athletes? And I think that's, a bigger discussion. But the way that I classify it here at Allied Strength is if they're playing their sport outside of just their regular season, then absolutely I think they're overhead athletes. If they're playing two sports that are overhead sports, even if they're 10 or 11 or 12, I think they're absolutely overhead athletes because, that's a lot of reps. If they're a baseball player, they're not just lobbing the ball, from, first to third. They're throwing it at maximum velocity. They're throwing, from the plate, from the mound to the plate at maximum velocity over and over and over again. Some of these kids, if they're playing the same sport, year round, they could be playing, baseball in the spring for school. Then they're playing in their summer league. Then they're maybe doing something in the winter, doing some indoor stuff, whether it be, throwing, whatever it might be. And, I think we have to look at the realities of youth athletics. Like I had an athlete that came in here who's 14, who's a Tommy John candidate at 14. Like this is the norm that we're seeing in these youth athletes. So I think we need to be better to be on the cautious side with this stuff. Again, this is kind of a bigger discussion, but that's just my brief thoughts on that. So when athletes become overhead athletes, again, I think if they're playing, in two seasons that are overhead sports, like if you have a swimmer and a baseball player, that's an overhead athlete. I don't care if you're 10, I don't care if you're 18. I think we need to have special considerations for that. And the last thing you want to have happen is for a parent to come in and say, well, now, his shoulder's all messed up. Like, were you having any considerations because he's an overhead athlete? And also, it is one of those things where you can use it as a tool when you're talking about your program, saying like, yeah, I know Johnny's a baseball player, so don't worry, we got him covered. We have overhead athlete considerations built into our program. So we're going to make sure he's going to be prepared, his shoulders are going to be happy, his elbows are going to be happy for the next season. And we also need to consider genetic age. That goes along with it too. Like you can have a 10-year-old that is as developed as a 14-year-old, a 14-year-old that looks like a 10-year-old. So genetic age is a huge component, especially at that middle school kind of program level. So I'm going to walk up and try to let you guys listen to this. This is a clip from a couple weeks ago, and hopefully you can hear this.
About the push-up progression in terms of using the bar, working the person down to the ground. I know poor Kevin Larrabee probably has got more back pain than he had before, because I'm going to say I am not a push-up fan, because I would still say 90% of the push-ups that I see in here are still not what I would like to see. So for those of you that weren't here, Kevin used to always argue that they had to be able to do perfect push-ups before they could bench press, and I sometimes think there'd be nobody in here who'd be able to ever get the bench press because we'd be nitpicking them to death on their push-up. But if we are going to do push-ups, we need to try to get chins down. And I think we still need to think sticks along the back, tennis balls under their chin, whatever. Constantly be looking at your clients' push-ups and saying, okay, do I like that push-up? Is that a good push-up? I very, very rarely, even with my athletes who, especially depending on the time of year, will be some of the better athletes that are in here, I'd still say 90% of them don't do push-ups that I'm in love with. So makes me not as much a fan of push-ups. But we still do them once a week.
All right, so again, hopefully you guys picked that up. And one thing like this is, I see these because I still edit the staff meetings at MBSC. I still watch them every single week. It's probably one of the most valuable resources in strength and conditioning. If you're not on Body by Boyle online, watching the genesis of all this stuff, because this is where the debate and the discussions happen, really valuable resource for folks. But again, obviously you heard Mike's thoughts on that. He's not happy with like about 90% of the push-ups that he sees. But I think I would look at it this way. I think it's you can look at it a couple different ways. We'll put it that way. And it's hard because I'm not at MBSC anymore, so I haven't really poked my head around and sat around and watched the groups go in a long time. But I think it comes down to a couple things. One, are we really prioritizing really coaching up the push-up? One of the most important lifts at MBSC is the hang clean. We spend lots and lots and lots of time going over how do we coach it? How do we progress it? How do we make sure athletes are looking really good when they're doing them? How do we make sure that they're not going too heavy, they're not going too light? And I think it's one of those things where if you prioritize an exercise and you spend the time that you think it deserves, then you can get anything to look really good. Because if you can get 12 athletes doing really good hang cleans, you got to be able to also get 12 athletes doing good push-ups. Sometimes that comes down to how we progress and regress, and and like I was saying, I'm not convinced. Yeah, sorry, it's forget what movie that is. I should remember. It's a train movie. I own it too, but it's Jake Gyllenhaal for you. So again, my reason, respect and discussion. Mike Boyle has been one of the biggest influences on me as a coach and a person. Like I said, I've worked with him for an extremely long time, for almost 10 years now. I literally, when I was in college, I drove down to the train station, took the train to New York City. I think it was one of the first seminars I ever went to was him at the basement of a gym in New York City, and I figured out my way to get there and stayed overnight in a YMCA for like $20. You can do that too if you don't want to stay in a hotel. Like YMCA's, they have like bunk beds. You can rent out like a room there. And again, we always have our biases, past and present. Like before I was at MBSC, I did my internship at Cressy Sports Performance. There, I was the biggest fan of the barbell bench press you will ever meet. I benched as much as I possibly could, to the point where I tore, I think, my right pec twice and my left pec once. I still got the nice scar tissue left over from that. And I carried that with me. But what happens over the years is you coach more and more people, more adults, more athletes. You start seeing what works, and you start trying to figure out what is going to be the best way to help this population get to where they want to go. What's going to be the best way to make sure we keep these people happy, keep their shoulders happy, keep their elbows happy. And again, I think that's one of those things I also took from Mike is coming from Cressy's. I was like, we're still squatting, we're front squatting, we're back squatting, we're doing all this stuff, we're straight bar deadlifting. And it took me a while to be at MBSC and see actually I do understand why we're gonna do all this single leg training now. I understand why we're gonna prioritize that, why we're gonna do trap bar deadlift versus a straight bar deadlift for athletes. It took me some time, but again, those biases kind of faded. And again, success and application. So here's what we're going to cover. We're going to start speeding this up now that we got the backstory out of the way. Who are we talking about today? We're talking about new athletes. We're talking about new adults. We're talking about untrained individuals that need strength and stability in their shoulders, in their core, making sure that they can do these movements properly. Why the push-up should be your primary horizontal pressing exercise for most people. Why the barbell bench press is a problem for new and weaker athletes. We'll talk about my thoughts on that. When to move to the dumbbell and barbell bench press, and then my favorite push-up progressions, regressions, variations, loading options, and correctives. This is the stuff, this is the toolbox stuff. This is the stuff that, if anything, you're gonna get some good variations, some good regressions that you can do. Not everyone's gonna walk through your door and be able to do good push-ups from the ground. That's obvious. But we need to have regressions to help them get to that position. And we're also going to talk about why I think it's so important that we get people to do push-ups from the ground. Probably even not just from a mental standpoint, but also for the aging population. If they can't get up and down off the ground well, it's going to get them closer and closer to that kind of assisted living position. So why I don't like the bench press for middle school and untrained athletes, and some reason why it makes sense. Again, baseball player at 11, again, I think, why not be safe? We have all those racks. So one of the big considerations that go into the MBSC program and in a lot of gyms, even here, is that, all right, how can we make sure we best utilize the space? At MBSC, there's tons of power racks. So bench press makes sense, right? So I think you can use those same racks for regressing the push-up. Put a bar in the rack. We're going to actually talk a little bit more about that in a second, so I want to give that away. Large group setting logistics. Boys versus girls, sometimes not always. Again, I surveyed the athletes we have here. Again, coaching athletes at MBSC for 8 years. Before that, at Cressy Sports Performance. One of the points that Mike brought up is everyone likes the bench press. I think that was in the January staff meeting. Everyone likes the bench press. That is not what the conclusion that I've come to from coaching athletes. You find boys tend to go too heavy. They grind out reps. Looks not so great. They tend to be more likely to want to bench press, but girls tend to avoid increasing the weight. Mike brought up a great story. I think it was really close to when I started at MBSC. We were leading into my first summer there and talking about, there was a girl one summer back in Winchester who basically benched the same weight for 9 straight weeks. And that's on the coach. The coach should be looking at the program saying hey, do you want to try throwing a 2.5-pound plate on each side? Let's try going up this week. But at the same time, girls are usually going to be less likely to be like, yeah, can't wait to bench more this week than I did last week. That's usually more of a boy thing, not to have like generalities and gender. But again, that's just kind of like my thoughts on that. And yeah, like I said, a lot of that is on the coach. So I hate it because a lot of times you get a lot of bent wrists. And again, a lot of this stuff is going to be like, yeah, the coach should be paying attention. But in a large group setting, this becomes a little bit tougher. Form, like bent wrists, spotting, lack of attention in groups. I think only the 2 times I ever had to kick an athlete out of a group were, and this is when I was coaching the middle school kids, is boys that were screwing around and not paying attention during the bench press. Because the way that we'd set it up is like, I'm coaching 14, 15 kids. I can't spot every single kid. So athletes would be paired up with similar levels of strength because they're going to be benching about the same weight. So when one's benching, one's spotting. I would always explain, hey, your only job right now is to pay attention to the bar, to make sure that the person that is benching is safe. But sometimes you get athletes, looking around, not paying attention, and, worst case scenario, that bar falls out of the kid's hands. They get pinned, it falls on their chest, or the bar falls out of their hands and it hits them in the neck. Like, that is an absolutely devastating scenario. So the only time I ever kick kids out is when they're screwing around. I think Mike even, this is, again, lots of great experience. Mike's coached a lot of kids, a lot of experience, or lots of volume at MBSC. You get these things that come up. Boys going around and hitting each other while they're bench pressing, like joking around. Like, it's not a joking matter. Like, that could be a very serious injury if a kid breaks his ribs because the bar falls on him. A lot less likely in the less strong athletes, because they're probably benching like 45, 55 pounds. But drop 55 pounds on your throat, that's not going to feel good. Also, scaps are locked down. This is not like a huge thing, but it is a consideration when you're going really heavy. You're not going to get a lot of great scapular movement on the rib cage when you're kind of benching. Short kids, people reaching the floor, again, talking about middle school kids, they're going to have a bunch of step-up steps around the bench to make sure that they can have foot contact on the ground. Otherwise, it's basically like having a house with 4 supports and you just knock out 1 or 2 of the supports. It's going to be really hard to stabilize. Driving your feet on the floor gets you a lot of that stability to do a good bench press. And again, it's like risk versus reward. And that changes based on how athletes get stronger, what sports they play, how they develop. So the bench press is great for older, more developed athletes. They have that prerequisite core, shoulder stability, and strength. It's great for football players because you're going to probably have to prep them for when they go back to, high school or college, and they're going to bench a lot. Their coach is going to ask them, hey, how much are you benching now? It's a real big consideration for that. For logistics, if, like I said, you have a ton of racks, preparing your athletes for their high school or college program and testing. Like I have athletes that come here in the summer, and we prepare them for their collegiate program. Like I have some athletes that aren't going to be benching like 225. They might be benching like 95 as they go into their college program because, I have some female athletes that are, like 110 pounds, something like that. They're not going to be benching a ton, but we still need to prepare them for whatever they're going to have to do in college. Whether it's testing, you want to make sure that they still perform well in their testing, or just getting them ready for, they might just be training with their teammates and not with the strength coach, or paying very close attention to them while they're training. So you need to prepare them for just coaching them up to do a really good barbell bench press because they're going to have to do it in their program at high school or college. Here's why I love the push-up. Lots and lots of stuff to love. And doing them correctly. Mike mentioned he's not happy with 90% of the push-ups that he sees. But I would say all right, if a push-up is like 75 or 80% of the way there, you still got a lot of really good things going on. Because even that push-up where, an athlete is not doing everything perfect, what's going on? It's like, I like to compare it to a goblet squat. For a kid who is in day 1, never done a goblet squat before, and their knees are going all over the place, their hips are shifting it's their body trying to figure out how to stabilize. You're getting lots of great shoulder and scapular stability stuff going on. You got core stability stuff going on. You got hip stability stuff going on. Because a lot of things need to work together. It's really like a moving plank when you think about it. So what's good enough? I think 75% of the way there, 80% of the way there is great. And if it's not great, how can we regress them to make sure it does look great? So again, it comes down to execution and also programming, which we'll talk about in a second. And again, I don't love this quote. Mike didn't like this quote, but I was trying to think of an analogy. So push-ups are like learning how to do a push-up is like learning how to walk, but with your arms. You're figuring out how to get multiple systems and multiple joints and groups of muscles to work together for a fundamental movement pattern. And shoulder and scapular stability, reducing the risk of shoulder injuries, practicing good scapular humeral rhythm. It's always a fun word to say. And catching the fall. So I have a lot of athletes here that play soccer. They play sports where it's not necessarily upper body dominant. That upper body strength is still really important for fighting for position, making sure that they're not getting knocked down on the ground when they're going for a ball. But also, it's really important for catching themselves when they do get knocked down, making sure there was an athlete last season, a local school, that basically dislocated her shoulder because she just came down to the ground and she didn't have that upper body strength to decelerate. Like push-ups are a really good upper body deceleration movement too for that shoulder health and to make sure, not going to happen all the time, but you never want an athlete to dislocate their shoulder. And again, you could say, I would say you could probably make that same case for the barbell bench press. Yeah, you could, but I still think the push-up is better. Core stability while exerting upper body force, again, fighting for position. Better for overhead athletes. We know this. When we classified this, we talked about that. And you can also put like tennis in there as well. Volume on their shoulders. So we'll talk about, push-ups are great because you're also going to have these athletes go to practice or go to their school program and they might have to do a lot of push-ups. Push-ups are still used as like punitive recourse for making a mistake in practice. I have an athlete who is a swimmer. They'll do dry land training sometimes, and they will do like crazy things like push-up pyramids where they'll do 12 reps and 11 reps, 10 reps, 9 reps, 8 reps, 7 reps. And this is a swimmer that literally came to the gym because he was having shoulder problems. He had chronic shoulder discomfort and pain. Came in here, 2 weeks later, pain's gone. It has been gone until he had to do the push-up pyramid at practice. And since then, he's a sophomore swimmer and he's like making a huge impact. Like he's probably the best swimmer at his school now because he's put in the work. He's really good at push-ups and his shoulders have never been better. He's been able to go in season with the school, plus do his club swimming, plus train here. That's a lot of volume for his shoulders, but his shoulders have been great. And they're self-limiting for safety. I think self-limiting exercises are fantastic, especially for the untrained population, for those middle school athletes. If you can't push yourself up off the ground, you just go back down on the ground. Like you're not going to go that far. And usually we're going to have a pad there too, which you'll see in a second. And multiple vectors for progression that are low risk. We're going to talk about that stuff. So also, they're really empowering. So I don't think you can hear that, but basically this is Julie. She is part of our adult group here. She had been working for about 6 months to do a push-up when she got to this position. She had been working down on the rack. First time we ever tried it, she got 2. I don't want to say it's a financial motivation here, but again, it's empowering. Just look at her face. We're having a little fun doing a little post push-up interview. Like, that's powerful. I look at that and, she came in here saying like, you know what I'd really like to do? Push-ups and chin-ups. We're still working on the chin-ups. We're progressing on that. But for a long time, she thought she was never going to be able to do that push-up. She was saying to me, Kevin, I'm just never going to be able to do it. And I'm like, no, we're going to keep progressing this stuff. We're going to use variable rep ranges, which we'll talk about more in a couple minutes, with our programming to make sure that we're building up that volume so she can get there. And this is what we're talking about. This is Jade. She's one of our high school athletes. She's actually going to college next year. And again, one of those things where she came in, was not doing good push-ups. Now this is her doing, I think it's maybe 8 or 10 push-ups for the 20-pound weight vest.
That's awesome.
Look at that enthusiasm, same kind of enthusiasm there. But for real, she was really excited about that. Like, Yeah, for female athletes, for your female clients and your adult group members, this is probably going to be more empowering because, boys and men are going to be a lot more upper body dominant. Push-ups are going to be a lot tougher for those female athletes and for those female clients. Here's Yvonne. So this is the first time she attempted doing her bodyweight push-ups to the ground. Again, we started in the rack. We started at a rather high angle, working with those variable rep ranges, and then going down a little bit every single week. Every time she was hitting the top of that variable rep range, we were moving her back down. First time she tried these, 1 push-up.
Push.
2. There's Tom in the background again, giving her a little bit of encouragement.
Take that 2 for today.
And now she came in yesterday and she did 7. So this was probably, I want to say this might have been we'll call it 6 or maybe 8 weeks ago. We'll call it 2 months. But what's so great about the push-up, it's kind of like the chin-up too. Once you get that first one, once you get over that barrier, the second one's easier. The third one's easier than the second. The fourth is easier to get to than the third, and so on and so forth. Which is, again, it's one of those things where you get to continue to see awesome progression on that stuff. So where do you start? Elevated angle, but never on the knees. Use racks, use benches, use plyo boxes, use whatever you got around you to elevate someone. I like the racks because if you have a power rack, they're actually behind the camera, but power rack or a Smith machine, you can use small increments in progression. Use variable rep ranges. Variable rep ranges are the most underutilized programming, strategy. I don't understand why more people aren't using these. For exercises like the push-up, where you can use we'll talk about this more in a minute, but a 6 to 10 rep range where, hey, we're gonna make sure we do at least 6. We're gonna go up to 10. Once we hit that limit of 10, we're gonna progress. We're gonna shoot for 6. Get 6 today. We're gonna go up to 7, 8, 9, 10. And then when we hit to 10, we progress again. That might be lowering down to the ground, might be going from body weight to doing some vest loaded stuff, whatever it might be. I think this is the same thing with a kettlebell deadlift. You have someone that comes in who's untrained, you have them go from a 16 kg to a 20 kg deadlift. We're talking about going from roughly, 34 pounds to going to 40 in, 2.2. So it'd be 44 pounds, something like that. We're talking about every time you go up 4 kilograms, that's 9 pounds, right? So that's a big jump. So why not use variable rep range? We do it with our deadlifts too. We're gonna do at least 6, we're gonna go up to 8. Once you can do 8, let's go to the heavier weight. We'll start with 6, we work our way up. Use variable rep ranges, especially for push-ups, for chin-ups, for deadlifting, for all those things. I even use them with goblet squats. Use them for those things where the next jump is a big jump, especially for kettlebell exercise. I think that's a big one. We do it with our kettlebell swings too. Dumbbells are easier. 5-pound jumps are a lot easier than 9-pound jumps. So just keep that in mind. If there's anything you get out of this, variable rep ranges, please use them. They're just incredibly valuable for coaching and for programming. Use our tempo. Are we doing these under control? One of the biggest mistakes, and I think I mentioned this again, but we see athletes or adults come down and then they lose the tension at the bottom. It's the same thing that we see go wrong in a deadlift or a squat pattern or a chin up, where they come down and then they relax. They lose all that tension. That tension is incredibly important. Once you lose it, it's hard to get it back for that next rep. So if you're under control, you get a little bit of a pause and then you come back up, maintain that tension throughout, you're gonna be in a much better spot. So again, where do you start? From a programming standpoint, we're gonna be talking about athletes here specifically for a second, because on our day one for programming, we do chin-ups. So with chin-ups, that's in our first tri-set. Our second tri-set, we have push-ups. So this is a little bit, in the second tri-set, I usually go a little bit higher rep. So that's our higher rep, higher volume day. We do 8 to 12 reps. We're gonna do at least 8, we're gonna go up to 12. Once we do 12, we progress, whether it's, again, lowering closer to the ground, loading it up with vest resistance, whatever it might be. Day 2, lower rep, lower volume. We're doing 6 to 10 reps. So it's a little bit heavier. We might go a little bit lower on the rack that day. We might be loading up with a vest that day, whatever it might be. Or that's gonna be our dumbbell or our barbell bench press. So again, once I have an athlete do 8 really good push-ups, I'm gonna say, hey, we have this option now. Do you wanna do dumbbell bench press? Do you wanna continue to progress with the push-ups? Again, mostly For the female athletes, for female adults here, they're all saying, no, I just want to do push-ups. Let's grab a vest. Let's go. For the boys, they are more towards the, wanting to do a barbell or a dumbbell bench press. Again, just what I've seen, and people can do whatever they like. They have those options. I like to give some options, give them a little bit of ownership over kind of where they're going next. And then day 3, we're doing push-ups again or overhead pressing if they're not an overhead athlete. Again, push-ups, for some athletes, we do push-ups 3 days, and it works out great. So again, after 8 great bodyweight push-ups, that's when we're gonna have those benching options, dumbbell or barbell bench press. Dumbbell bench for all overhead athletes until you run out of loading options. So I have power blocks, courtesy of MBSC. Again, lots of great connections. We can go up to 90 pounds with those. Once we have an athlete doing 290s and they've gone through our dumbbell bench press progressions, which is gonna be not just a dumbbell bench press, but we might be doing alternating, we might be doing single arm, whatever it might be. Once we've exhausted those options, we got the bar. Let's go on the rack, let's do our barbell bench press. Because again, we got those open chain benefits from the dumbbell. It's much better for shoulder stability and for those overhead athletes. Of course, for football players, we're gonna barbell bench because they're probably gonna be asked to do that when they get to school. And then just be smart about this stuff. It's not over, we don't have to overcomplicate this stuff, just be smart. So critical push-up cues. So are we doing a good job cueing? I would go back and say, again, Mike looking around, and again, this is me just taking a guess because again, I'm not there. But I would say, all right, if you're looking around and you see people doing push-ups and you're not happy with 90% of the push-ups, all right, are we using good push-up cues? Are we make sure we're really coaching it up? Are we okay with how those look? My very first staff meeting, man, I had it a little bit of, I was just going for it at my first staff meeting at MBSC. I'm in the basement with all these staff members I don't know. And I think I was there the day before, just kind of hanging out. It was my first day there. I think the second day was Tuesday, was my first staff meeting, and I raised my hand like a huge a-hole, and I say, so Mike, I was looking around and I saw some form that I didn't think was great. So how shitty is too shitty? This is a quote or a thing that Mike has brought back up to kind of describe what are we going to be okay with form-wise? And I think it's just one of those things. If the coaches are really saying, hey guys, we're going to put an emphasis on this. We're going to make sure we really coach it up. Let's use good coaching cues. Let's pay attention to stuff. Let's not be okay with bad reps. Then I think we can elevate the quality of those push-ups at the gym. Are we doing a good job cueing? Hands slightly outside and parallel to shoulders. So again, here, hands outside shoulders, one of the things that we see a lot is that hands will be in front of shoulders. So I don't know if I can kind of demo this for you guys. Instead of being here, we're here. We see this a lot in female athletes. It's really weird. We see it in the same thing with the bench press too, where they kind of bring the bar down to their face. But it's actually in both male and female athletes and adults. Are we making sure that their hands are outside their shoulders and not in front of their shoulders, so they're kind of doing like a crazy tricep extension? Are we making sure that they got a good elbow position around 45 degrees? Doesn't need to be perfect, but you don't want them to be locked into the rib cage, and you want them at 90. You want them somewhere in the middle. Are they leading with their torso? Mike brought that up in the video. Are we making sure that they're keeping their chins tucked and they're not leading with their head or their face? I think that's one of the things that, at the start, this was years ago now, but we started having everyone at MBSC do push-ups to a pad. So they're getting a little bit of elevation. That kind of gets you just so your arms are going to be parallel to the ground. And I kind of fought that. I'm like, why wouldn't we just use full range of motion? But I'm a huge fan of that now. It's one of those things that I came around on. And it's a really good tool because you can say, I want you to touch your chest to the pad every single time. The two biggest mistakes that we see, or I should say one of the two biggest mistakes that we see, is they're going to lead with their head. They're going to try to touch their face to the pad. So we need to make sure it's down. So their only option is to touch it with their chest, or they're going to lead with their stomach or their hips. You see that a lot in hockey players, swimmers. These athletes that earn a lot of extension. They're going to lead with their hips a lot. So you might have to have them get their hips up and get them a little bit of extra stability by squeezing a pad in between their knees, get a little bit of extra core stability while they're doing that stuff. Again, just have all those tools. If you don't see a good push-up, there's lots of things you can try to make it look better before just throwing it out. Control, 2 to 3 seconds on the way down. That's excessive, I would say. But for those new athletes, the ones that you see they're bouncing on the pad or they're losing that tension as they go down to the ground, make them slow it down a little bit. Don't bounce, don't lose that tension. What about wrist issues? So this is Nick. He's actually going to be here in a little bit. He has really bad like carpal tunnel and thumb issues. He cannot put his hand on the ground without being in extreme pain. So what do? We use dumbbells, and we actually have an extra pad there because those dumbbells are going to lift him off the ground. This is the first time we actually try these. We have been working in the rack because the bar is a good position for him too, because he doesn't need to flatten out his hand. But this is the first time we ever did these, and he crushed them. Yeah, not perfect. You might say like, oh yeah, he's got a little bit of extra extension, that low back. But for day one, that was really, really good. And he knocked those out, and guess what? No hand pain. I also like perfect push-ups. This is really the only reason why I have these in here are for people that have thumb or hand issues where they can't put their hands flat on the ground. This will give them the ability to do those correctly. This is the best push-up corrective that you could have in your toolbox, a yellow mini band. So I would say 90% of the time when I have someone that says, yeah, I kind of bugged my shoulders a little bit when I was doing those. All right, we're going to get a mini band. We're going to put it at your wrist. Let's do it again. Like, oh yeah, well, pain's gone. Okay, so what we're doing here is very much like what we do with a mini band below the knees when someone is going into a squat pattern. Their knees are caving in. Their hips aren't doing what they're supposed to do to stabilize. Same thing here with the push-up. So what we're doing is basically allowing for some extra shoulder stability in that push-up pattern. Again, use it just like you would for someone doing a bad squat where their knees are caving in. We're kind of forcing them into the air. We're basically making them create more stability with their hips. Same thing here with their shoulders, with the band at their wrists. I would guess, again, if you have someone with shoulder problems or just like, for some reason today that's bugging their shoulders, you have them do it with a band at the wrist, they're going to be good to go. I probably should have played the video while you're doing this. And again, when you're doing that, you probably don't need the pad because the band is going to be kind of your goal. You're going to go to that band, which is going to be about the same height. Push-up progressions and regressions. So this is actually an older video, but this is our adult group. This is probably like last summer. But we have my stepdad Ed doing band resisted push-ups. He has the worst shoulders I've ever seen on an adult, but he has, again, progressed that stuff. It's knocking those out. Got Ronnie doing some body weight stuff. I'll actually kind of back this up. And then we also have Hillary, who's over on the side over here. She's doing, obviously, elevated push-ups. So just showing off a couple of those progressions. This is my mom, who, this is, I want to say 6 months post-knee replacement surgery. And to her credit, she's actually lost like 40 more pounds since this video. But showing that elevated position. And see, like these racks have, what'd you call it, like 4, maybe 6 inches of progression every single time. So you can really gradually bring them closer and closer to the ground. She started a little bit higher, and now we're all the way to the bottom on that rack. She can knock out a couple bodyweight push-ups, but again, 6 to 10 reps. Can we make sure we get the rep range that we're looking for? This is with 2 pads. This is one of the things, like when we're getting really close to doing that bodyweight push-up to the ground, I'll just, all right, let's elevate them a little bit. You're gonna see even from this part right here, I almost have those arms parallel to the ground in that 90-degree bend in that elbow. It's pretty close. And that way, you can get them to practice that tension, the control, tap the pad, come back up. This is one where I'm actually going to show you before I do it. So this was, I don't know, like 20 days, maybe 18 days post back surgery. So I didn't do this as perfectly as I wanted to, but basically one of the things that we see when people are doing a push-up that we're not loving, a lot of times their hips stay down, where they'll kind of keep their hips down. They'll push up, but their hips will stay down as they're pushing up. So what we can do is also like kind of coach them to almost push backwards, almost like they're going into like a 45-degree press, like an overhead press kind of. And like you're gonna see my hips push back up. I would probably want it to be a little bit more excessive, but that L5S one was not back to where I want it to be, so I was playing it a little safer, and you'll kind of see it. So kind of pushing my butt up first as I'm going through these. Again, it's just something to try. It's actually not something that we use a lot, but it's just something to try as a regression. before we're getting people to do like really good push-ups to the ground. And it's still like, that's really good. We got a good eccentric going down to the ground, and the concentric is just slightly modified. So this is Mia. You saw her sister Jade before. Mia is 17. She is a soccer player. She has been training here now for about a year. This is maybe a couple months ago now. But basically, again, we started with bodyweight push-ups. You can see Mia is not a very big person. This is 6 reps, 7, 8. So you're going to see the other weight vest behind her. So she's tired. That's a 30-pound weight vest. That was after she did her first set with a 10, first set with a 20. She had been working with about a 20-pound weight vest for 8 reps, or actually we're working up to 12 reps. So when we hit 12 reps with a 20-pound weight vest, what's next? 30-pound weight vest. So for her last set, that's why she was a little tired. You can see, again, a little bit of extension of that low back. This is kind of like a maximum effort thing. If you're gonna, make a comment about that, do something better with your life. But again, this was a maximum effort attempt. And again, it's one of those things, she's really proud of that. She should be really proud of that. That's a really awesome thing to be able to do. And again, she's only gonna get stronger. We have a 40-pound weight vest behind the camera that has her name all over it. So this is stupid. This was me when I got all the weight vests. This is pre-surgery. But it's showing feet elevated push-up. So I like the feet elevated push-up progression. You're usually going to have your hands elevated too. Otherwise, you end up kind of hitting your head on the ground. But this is me just being kind of an idiot because I think I think this is 80 pounds worth of weight vests on doing these. But at least you can kind of demo. I was kind of searching for videos and I couldn't really film a new one of these just yet. But at least you can kind of see what I'm talking about. I usually max at a 12-inch box. They're actually not here, but what I would actually rather do these days, I've been mostly using like a 6-inch, I guess you would call it a plyo box. It's really a step-up box. It's like those blue step-up boxes that I have over there. But I usually use that 6, and that 6 with a 4 on top for like 10 inches. So we use 6 inches, and then we'll progress to 10 inches. And I don't love this progression because I think it always gets a little bit weird. It almost gets, again, leading with the head a lot on these. That's me showing off. So again, band resisted stuff, again, don't love it, but I have this option, right? Because the band resisted version is pretty great because you get the maximal resistance at the top. It gets easier as you go down, maximal resistance at the top. It's the same thing like with the chain, like if you're doing push-ups with chains. Same idea, but I think the band is a little bit safer. And again, this is my stepdad Ed just crushing it. He's one of the best success stories at this gym, just because now, we're always having to do a lot of shoveling here in the Northeast in the winters, and his shoulders don't bug him as much. If he went into a surgeon, he would say he needs to get both those shoulders operated on, but since he's been training here, shoulders have been feeling great, obviously doing, really great push-ups. And again, this is one of those things I did it post-back surgery, so usually I like to have, if we're gonna use a suspension trainer, I'd rather have people elevate their feet so they can get a better angle on this, but I did my best. Otherwise, these handles should actually be a little bit farther forward, but just for demonstration purposes, you can see how much my shoulders are shaking. This is a great drill for shoulder stability. You can use a TRX, you can use other suspension, you can use rings, whatever. But again, it's just a progression. I really don't use this a lot. I just use it with a couple of my really strong athletes and adults. But it's one of those things where, you can be safe with this. You can progress it by, having your feet on the ground, progressing by using angles just like we would in a rack. I like this one, again, for shoulder stability for overhead athletes. It's kind of the step up, push up. Or again, focusing just on being stable, not getting any hip or shoulder or torso rotation, I should say. It's great when, we can do 4 on each side, up to 6 on each side with these. So plyo push-ups, I think plyo push-ups are terrible. I think if you're programming plyo push-ups, you're basically just asking for a shoulder injury or an elbow injury or a pec tear. But I do like the T push-up. So again, this is kind of post-surgery, so I did my best for you guys, but really what we want to make sure is that those shoulders stay in line with our hips. The biggest mistake that we see with this is that people will, turn and their hips won't turn with their shoulders, but you can actually see it. There's a decent demo of it. And you're still getting a little bit of a plyometric as you catch yourself on the way down, and then you catch yourself on the way down. So you're getting still some good decelerative components for that push-up variation. So I really like that. Again, requires good core stability and hips, basically making sure that we're keeping those hips locked down. So again, now we're done. So wrap up, just use your progressions, use your regressions, use your correctives, your loading patterns, ways that you can make these push-ups even better. Coach it. Use good coaching cues. I think, if we want something to be better, we got to coach it up. We got to prioritize that. Are we making sure that we're coaching the push-up as a high priority exercise? Or are we just saying, all right, guys, and you're going to do 6 to 10 push-ups, just make sure that you control yourself on the way down. And now let's actually spend more time talking about this exercise. Give it, the time that it deserves to be done well. Again, let me preface that. I'm not making assumptions based on how the coaches are coaching at MBSC. It's the #1 gym in America, folks. Like, there is no better place, maybe except at Allied Strength, if you're up in Cape Ann. But I'm just joking, of course. There's a reason why I loved my time there for 8 years. There's a reason why I was such a huge proponent of it, because, great coaches, great people, great programming. So the last thing you should think about this talk is me thinking that, I think anything less of MBSC. There's a reason why I still love those folks. There's a reason why, I still love watching those staff meetings every single week, still getting inspiration from those, like even for videos like this. Use those variable rep ranges. If there's one thing that you take from this, use variable rep ranges when you're trying to progress stuff. When you have someone doing a chin-up with band assistance in their knees, make sure they get to that higher rep range before we have them go to a lighter band or go to bodyweight, whatever it might be. Think about this stuff. Discuss it. Let me know if you have questions. I'm happy to answer them. And again, thank you for your time. I know this was not a short video. It's probably a little bit longer than I thought it was going to be. But I appreciate you hanging out, listening to this, watching this, whatever it might be. Hopefully you take some value from this. And again, shout out to all my colleagues, my former coworkers, and all the new coaches at MBSC. You guys are doing a great job. Again, there's a reason why Mike has such an incredible reputation. It's why he is very much a leader in our industry, because we look up to him. We want to see what he thinks, because he's had such incredible success at MBSC for an incredibly long time, and his work, with whether it's collegiate or major league teams during and before that. So thank you to Mike for everything he's done for me and for the industry. Thank you again to everyone that watched this. Again, I hope you got something out of it. Thank you so much, and take care. Go do some push-ups.